Friends, thank you for being here today. What if I told you that a nation possessing every single ingredient required to dominate the global automotive industry, from the raw lithium and aluminum in the ground to the world-class engineers in the factories, does not own a single mass-market car brand of its own? And how is it possible that a country which once stood as the second largest automaker on Earth has allowed its entire domestic industry to become a manufacturing outpost for foreign corporations? This is the great paradox of the Canadian automotive landscape. On the surface, the industry appears to be a juggernaut of production and efficiency. Every year, over 1.3 million vehicles roll off Canadian assembly lines. From the rugged Chevrolet Silverados and Ford F-150s to the reliable Toyota RAV4s and Honda Civics, Canada manufactures some of the most popular vehicles on the planet. These cars are built in southern Ontario, in facilities that rank among the most advanced and quality-obsessed in the world. Yet, if you look at the badges on the grilles of these millions of vehicles, you will find emblems from Detroit, Tokyo, and Stuttgart. You will not find a single Canadian flag. The absence of a domestic brand is even more baffling when one considers Canada's natural endowment. Most nations dream of having the raw materials necessary to build a car from scratch. Canada actually has them. The Canadian Shield is a treasure trove of the very elements powering the modern industrial world and the electric vehicle revolution. There is nickel from Sudbury, vast aluminum smelting capabilities in Quebec, copper from British Columbia, and significant deposits of cobalt, lithium, and rare earth metals. Combined with a reliable energy grid, a stable political environment, and a highly skilled workforce, Canada looks, on paper, like the ideal birthplace for an automotive giant. So, why doesn't one exist? To understand this failure, or perhaps this calculated economic evolution, we must look back at a time when Canada did build its own cars, analyse the economic forces that dismantled those dreams, and confront the brutal geographic realities that prevent them from returning. Before we travel back in time to uncover this history, if you are finding this topic as fascinating as I do, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring more of these deep dives to you. To fully grasp the current situation, we must travel back to 1918, an era where the Canadian automotive dream was not only alive but thriving. In the early 20th century, the automotive landscape was not the oligopoly of massive conglomerates we know today. It was a wild frontier of innovation, and Canada was a major player. Over a dozen indigenous Canadian car companies were in operation, producing vehicles for a hungry public. Names like McLaughlin, Brooks, Grey Dort, Russell, Tudhope and Brockville Atlas were commonplace. These were not small backyard hobbyist operations. They were serious industrial endeavours. The McLaughlin Motor Car Company in Oshawa, Ontario, for example, was producing thousands of high-quality vehicles annually. By 1923, this industrial fervour had propelled Canada to a staggering height. It was the second-largest automaker in the world, trailing only the United States. It is almost difficult to conceive of today, but with a population of only about 9 million people, Canada was outproducing industrial titans like Germany, France, and Great Britain. This golden age was fueled by a unique convergence of geography, politics, and imperial loyalty. Geography provided the initial spark. Proximity to the United States allowed for the easy flow of technology and mechanical expertise. Many Canadian automakers began by licensing American designs, essentially taking a US engine and chassis and refining it for the Canadian market. Furthermore, the Great Lakes provided a natural superhighway for logistics. Iron ore could be shipped from Minnesota, transformed into steel and cars in Ontario, and then moved via the St. Lawrence River system to markets across the nation and across the ocean. However, the true engine of this early success was the British Empire. In the 1920s, global trade was governed by a web of tariffs and protectionist policies. As a dominion of the British Empire, Canada enjoyed the imperial preference system, which meant that cars built in Canada could be exported duty-free to other parts of the empire, including Britain, Australia, New Zealand, India and South Africa. Conversely, American cars faced steep tariffs in these markets. This created a massive incentive for production within Canadian borders. To further protect this budding industry, the Canadian government imposed its own high tariffs on imported vehicles. If Ford or General Motors wanted to sell cars in Canada, they couldn't just ship them from Detroit, they had to build them in Canada. This policy forced American giants to establish branch plants, but it also provided a shelter under which independent Canadian brands could flourish. But the seeds of the industry's destruction were sown in the very geography that helped birth it. The fundamental problem that has plagued the Canadian auto industry from its inception to the present day is market size. Automotive manufacturing is a game of economies of scale. It requires astronomical upfront investment, hundreds of millions, if not billions, of dollars for factories, tooling and supply chains, before a single dollar of revenue is generated. To make this investment viable, a manufacturer needs volume. The more cars you build, the cheaper each individual unit becomes. In the 1920s, Canada had a population of 9 million, compared to the United States' 115 million. Canadian automakers were competing against American giants that had a domestic market more than 10 times larger. A factory in Detroit could simply produce more cars, more cheaply than a factory in Oshawa. As long as the British Empire markets remained open, Canadian companies could survive on exports. But in October 1929, the stock market crashed and the global economy collapsed. In the panicked aftermath, nations retreated behind walls of protectionism. The British Empire markets dried up as Britain and Australia moved to protect their own domestic industries. Simultaneously, the Canadian domestic market evaporated as unemployment soared past 25%. This created a perfect storm that wiped out the independents. American companies like Ford and GM had the deep capital reserves to weather the storm. Canadian independents did not. One by one, they vanished. By 1935, the dream of an independent Canadian car brand was effectively dead. Yet, even with these historic subsidies, the stability of the industry is shaky. We have seen production mandates shift and manufacturing lines move south to the US, driven by the gravitational pull of the American market and policies like the Inflation Reduction Act. This has led to a growing anxiety within Canada. There is a sense that the country is bleeding capital. Over $50 billion in investment flowed from Canada to the US in a recent 7-month period alone, and that the nation is merely renting its place in the industry rather than owning it. However, friends, we must pause here and ask ourselves a difficult, comparative question. We have listed these barriers, market size, supply chains, geography, as if they are immutable laws of physics that doom any smaller nation to failure. But are they? If a small population and cold climate were the only determinants of automotive success, how do we explain Sweden, a nation of only 10 million people, a quarter of Canada's population with harsh winters and high labour costs, gave the world Volvo and Saab? How do we explain South Korea? In the 1960s, its economy was smaller than Canada's. It had absolutely no automotive heritage, and it faced significant geopolitical threats. Yet today, Hyundai and Kia are global dominators, and South Korea is an automotive superpower. Why could they build what we could not? The answer lies in the choices we made about our own comfort and security. Countries like South Korea and Sweden treated their automotive industries not just as jobs programs, but as pillars of national sovereignty. South Korea, lacking a friendly giant neighbour to trade with, was forced to adopt a policy of aggressive independence. They protected their domestic market fiercely, banning imports to force their citizens to buy nascent, often inferior, local cars until the quality improved. They supported their chaebols with state-directed capital, not just to assemble foreign designs, but to create their own intellectual property. They accepted short-term pain for long-term ownership. Canada took the opposite path. We chose the branch plant economy. We chose the immediate prosperity and job security offered by the American auto giants over the risky, expensive and difficult path of independence. And let's be honest, for decades, this was a very good deal. It built the middle class in Ontario. It put food on the table for generations of workers in Windsor and Oshawa. But it came with a hidden cost that we are only now fully calculating: a complete loss of leverage. When you are a branch plant economy, you are always the first to be cut and the last to be invested in. You are not the head office, you are a cost centre. We are seeing this play out right now in real time. As the United States turns increasingly inward with America First policies and the Inflation Reduction Act, Canada finds itself in a precarious position. We are scrambling to match American subsidies dollar for dollar, not to build something new, but just to keep what we already have. The $15 billion pledged to Stellantis is not venture capital for a new Canadian future. It is essentially a ransom payment to prevent an existing partner from leaving. This is the sovereignty trap. By integrating so deeply with the US supply chain, we made ourselves efficient, but we also made ourselves vulnerable. A Canadian car brand would not threaten to move its headquarters to Michigan or Mexico in search of better tax credits. A Canadian brand would be rooted here, but because we do not have one, we are forced to negotiate for our economic lives every time the political winds shift in Washington. We traded the headaches of ownership for the security of employment, only to find that in the 21st century, employment without ownership offers no security at all. We are realizing that while we were busy building cars for the world was busy building leverage over us. The question is no longer, can we build a car? Technically. The question is, can we afford the political price of not owning our own economic destiny? I want to know what you think. Is economic efficiency worth the loss of national sovereignty, or should Canada have taken the risk like South Korea? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. In conclusion, the reason Canada cannot build its own cars is not a failure of imagination, nor is it a lack of talent. Canadian workers are among the most productive in the world, and Canadian engineers design components found in vehicles across the globe. The failure is one of geographic and economic determinism. The small size of the domestic market necessitates exports, and the geography of the continent necessitates that those exports go to the United States. Trade agreements like the Auto Pact and NAFTA formalize this relationship, trading sovereignty for jobs. Canada chose, perhaps wisely, perhaps out of necessity, to be a wealthy, employed participant in someone else's industry rather than a bankrupt owner of its own. As we look to the future of electric mobility, Canada's role seems destined to remain the same: the hewer of wood, the drawer of water, and the assembler of other people's dreams. The badge on the hood may change, but the economics behind it likely never will.